Well, welcome everyone and good morning. It's a beautiful day. It's always beautiful because God has given us so many things to rejoice in all the time. Lost and found. Have you ever thought of all the things that are found in a lost and found compartment? Or if you've ever were responsible for a lost and found department, you realize how many strange things appear there. Every Sunday, I end up discovering a few things that are left behind in the church. And during the week, sometimes people pick them up, and other times people forget that they even lost something. For example, last week somebody forgot these red glasses. I don't really expect anybody to be picking them up, but if they are yours, please come and claim them. I'm sure whoever lost them doesn't miss them a whole lot. Thank you. Everyone has lost things. And we lose some things that are of no value, this doesn't bother us. For example, when we look at old pictures, we see what we were wearing 10 years ago. Sometimes we wonder, what happened to that shirt, and why did I even buy it? For example, you may be happy that you lost your pink polka dot shirt that you bought on sale. But we also lose things that are of value. Some things have sentimental value, like a picture or a ring. And when we lose these things, we will do everything we can to find them. And unfortunately, we sometimes even lose people. We lose people as a result of death, and we also lose friendships for a variety of reasons. Think of what you have lost that is valuable. Think of how you felt when you lost it. Think of what you did to find it. And then think of how you felt when you found it. Jesus wants us to be aware of this range of emotions, this range that goes from sadness to great joy, when we lose and find things. Many refer to the gospel we heard today as the parable of the prodigal son. The word prodigal means the one who wasted his father's wealth. So this is referred to as the gospel of the son who wasted his father's wealth. But actually, this gospel is much richer than that. It can be called a variety of things. It can be called the gospel of the lost, repentant, and found son. It can also be called the gospel of the disappointed, grieving, welcoming, and forgiving father. Or it can also be called the gospel of the unappreciative and ungrateful brother. All these elements are found in this very rich gospel, in the Gospel of Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. But for us to appreciate fully the impact of Jesus' message, we actually have to start reading this section from the beginning of chapter 15 of the Gospel of Luke, where we find the reason why Jesus even told this gospel. The first two verses of chapter 15 read like this. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes murmured, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So Jesus was accused of spending far too much time with people who were marginalized by society. Instead of defending himself or getting into arguments with people, Jesus tells a story to demonstrate his point. This is actually a very unique section in the Gospel of Luke, because instead of one story or one parable or one answer, Jesus actually gives three successive stories that build upon each other. And today we only heard the third. I encourage you to read all of chapter 15 slowly, where you'll find the other two stories that focus on lost and found things. And this man receives sinners and eats with them, starts the section. And the first story is actually about lost sheep. 15 verses 3 to 7. So Jesus told this parable, what man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost. And then Jesus goes on to say, just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous ones who feel they have no need for repentance. This story in itself could have answered the question to the Pharisees and those who are criticizing Jesus. But Jesus takes it a step further. He says, let me make a second point. What woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the coin which I lost. And then Jesus says something similar to what he said before. Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So once again, these 2 points would have been sufficient to answer the question at hand. But then Jesus takes it a step further. And he gives the story, the parable that we heard today, the story of the lost son, which talks about a man who has lost his son. So this is not about a man who lost his sheep. This is not about a woman who lost a coin. This is something much more important. A man who lost a son. So these 3 points together should have overwhelmingly convinced those listening to him that Jesus was doing the right thing in spending time with sinners, tax collectors, and those who needed his time. It's really important to see the connection between all 3 passages, because the accusation against Jesus, this man receives sinners and eats with them, actually prepares for the first story, and then the first story prepares for the second, and the second prepares for the first. It's a very strong and convincing point that Jesus makes. Some Bibles actually even miss the unity of these sections, so the fact that you may have missed it is okay. I looked at this Bible, the Revised Standard Version, and it has section headings. The first one, the parable of the lost sheep. So far, so good. Second one, the parable of the lost coin. But then the third one, the heading is the parable of the prodigal and his brother, missing entirely the unity of the section. But then the New American Bible does it well. The parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the lost son, emphasizing that all 3 of these stories need to be read together. When you read them together, you also begin to notice similarities and a gradual build-up to the last section. What is one sheep out of 100? It's 1%. So 1% was lost, there was tragedy, and there was an effort to find it. One coin out of 10, 10%. One son out of 2, 50%. 1%, 10%, 50%. If we are worried about lost sheep and lost coins, how much more should we be worried about lost relationships? Therefore, if you worry about 1% loss of your sheep, you'll be much more worried, or should be worried, much more of 50% of lost humans, peoples. The ends of each section also portray a unity that finally ends with what we heard today. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is now found. We can call Luke 15, therefore, the lost and found section of the gospel. The more important thing than lost things, the final parable focuses on a lost and found son and the joy over a rebuilt family relationship. Jesus always tells parables. He tells parables because it is actually easier for all of us to see the faults of others than to see the faults of ourselves. And it's so important when we read the Bible to see the Bible as both a window and a mirror. A window looking at stories that we may not have heard before, looking at a world that may be new to us, but then, most importantly, to look at it as a mirror reflecting things that we do in our life and things that we need to change. All of us have had lost friendships. It's very important to understand and to reflect why. And to reflect that sometimes it is good to lose some friendships, and sometimes it is important to strengthen others. Our primary friendships, what are they? Friendships between parents and children, between siblings, between relatives. All these are primary friendships. The others are secondary. Friendships with people we meet. And friendships with people who affirm our values and help us become a better version of ourselves. We grieve when we lose friendships, whereas sometimes we need to be happy that we lost somebody who actually was never a friend and whose values don't align to ours. Someone once left a message on his phone. It said, "I am making some very important changes in my life. If I don't call you back, you are one of them." So it's okay to let go, despite the grief that we have. We also, sometimes through laziness, we lose our health. Last week, Bishop Nicholas and I went to watch the figure skating championships. And I've known Bishop Nicholas for 30 years. He said, "Do you remember when you looked like that?" I said, "I do. Hopefully I will regain some health." And on a more serious point, we also lose faith. We also lose spirituality. We also lose our belief in God when we expect God to be there for us, but we are not growing in our relationship with God. Sometimes people think that faith is for little children and for other people who have nothing better to do. But faith is a daily journey that we take with us absolutely every single day and in everything we do. You do not grow out of belief. I've heard it far too many times from people who are so active in church and then go to college, university, have some tragedy happen in their life, and say, we kind of grew out of it. You don't grow out of something that important. St. Paul says to us in Galatians chapter 6, "Let us not grow tired of doing good, for in due time we shall reap our harvest if we do not give up." And this is what our gospel focuses on today, and it's placed at the special time of the year that prepares for Easter. We are beginning now the preparations for the death and resurrection of Christ. And these next three Sundays, Meat Fair Sunday, Cheese Fair Sunday, and the Sunday of Orthodoxy, focus on these themes of repentance, getting closer to God, and growing in our faith life. And what is important in this gospel, and what Jesus emphasizes, is that there is a joy. There needs to be great joy in our relationships. There needs to be joy in fasting. There needs to be joy in faith. There needs to be joy in friendships. There needs to be joys in family life, and there needs to be joys in realizing that we are sons and daughters of God. Jesus always puts people before things, and today he challenges us to do the same thing.